first 10% of prototyping, which should really be about, as I said, having a small team moving fast. If you're working on existing tech, then you're going to be having the luxury of working on the toolkit that you made the previous title with, making it even better for the people that are going to be using it. Working on the engine itself, making that even more streamlined, working new things into it, and getting the scope and the pre-production design locked away. That's your ideal first 10%. Any number of things can get in the way of that, including megalomaniacal managerial people, externally or internally. But I mean, that's where you need a really good producer to protect you from that kind of thing, or you just need really good smarts yourself, and you really need to be able to talk these things down, talk people out about ideas, and always have supporting evidence, I guess.
So I can't vouch for this personally, but my old boss used to say that you would make your prototype, make it look exactly like it's the finished thing, give it to them, but you put one thing in there that is just so hideous and broken and appalling that like they both somehow that was his way of communicating. Here's how it's going to look. Here's what it can be, but man, it is not done.
Yeah, there's actually I worked even though I started off in industrial design, I ended up working in graphics and advertising in Singapore. I've got most of my soul back now, but anyway. But we used to call it the blue dog. You chuck a blue dog in there. It's something which is so absolutely broken that the attention is drawn to that. And hopefully it means, one, that they'll leave you alone with everything else, because like, that's really wrong. Oh, we'll sort that one out, and then you walk out the room, pretty much. Yeah. But yeah, having something in there which really shows that this is a work in progress. And from our point of view, what we've really found is that, especially when we're presenting to even internally and promoting and stuff like that, is that it either has to be absolutely obvious that it's a white box, or it's work in progress or a prototype, or it's the other one. And if you do somewhere in between, everybody gets confused. People get unhappy because they're not sure where everything's standing. And
I think it's that way, not even for like the approval above, but it's for everybody on the team. Like if you put in a bunch of polished art, it's going to maybe impress the manager, but now the people who are working on it, like, oh, is this our actual art style? Is this what we're shipping? Is this way, like the way high specular or whatever? Like, is this something that we're going to have to, incorporate? Like, it seems like it would be really easy to mess with your whole team vision of what it's supposed to be.
Label and license can be really, really touchy at that point. Yeah. Another fairly practiced model for the first 10% is to do a saddle section or a cross section of the game.
Very slice.
Yeah, slice. Where you're giving them some sort of front end that has a bit of polish, and some sort of first level that has a bit of polish, that has some sort of basic attack that has a bit of polish, and some sort of special attack, or some sort of nice looking car, or one track, or it's just like it's a little hotel bathroom soap packet version of your game. So they can get a really good feel for the label. They can get a really good feel for the artistic aesthetic that you're going for, and they can also experience the engine in its early stage. So you're not showing them an entire game that's highly busted and having them go, that's great, that's shit done.
Have you ever had a blue dog that they've actually liked?
No, I think that another design rule is when presenting design, you try and present three. One that you really are invested into, a second one which is one that you'd be happy to go with, and then the blue dog, so you automatically rule out one, so it comes to the choice of two. Otherwise they start trying to say, oh well, we like a bit of number one, a bit number two, and a bit number three, mix them all together and we've got something perfect. And you end up with a bigger blue dog than you probably started with. But no, I've been lucky. I think if you make your blue dog ugly enough, then you have to say.
It's tricky. You don't want to be in like, you think you have this clever like way of interacting with your client. I've been there for like 3 or 4 years, and you're like, okay, well I don't want to tell them how to do this project because that's going to get us off on the wrong foot. So I'm just going to give them, you know, a choice between like this obviously awesome idea and this obviously terrible idea. And they're like, man, that terrible one sounds amazing. When can you start? And it's like, never? This is the, no, we can't do this.
You've got to be really careful about what you show to a publisher, because you spend so long so close to the game, and you forget that they know absolutely nothing about it, and they're just getting a build once every so often and having a look at it and going, oh yeah, can we have a flamethrower? Or I want that to be blue, you know. And if you give them something somewhere in there that potentially isn't defined well enough yet, or is just wrong, or is unfinished, they'll look at it and they could have any number of reactions about it. They could, I think the worst possible reaction is taking something completely the wrong way, assuming too much about it, and then saying, oh, so, you know, we're going to get that now though, right? And, no, that was never in the plan.
Yeah, like I love where you're going with this. It's going to be like, now it's going to be an FPS, but the different colored bullets make it a match 3. So, you know, keep running with that, guys. That one's for free, fellas. You can do it.
Get an idea on it now. Next question.
I'll just go with that. I was just wondering with your 10%, and a lot of you are suggesting that a lot of it is prototyping. But how much of that, or do you consider any of that 10% coming up with like a core idea, like a mechanic or whatever your sort of core segment of the game is? Do you include that in the 10%, or is it once you've got that idea down, is this 10% sort of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think initially if you're going to go into a prototyping phase, you want there to be a core idea or a core sort of situation which you're going to be building the game around. I mean, you've got the pitching phase, which is really before this phase. So during that period, you've already isolated, maybe you've had 6 or 7 ideas as a group, and just, you know, eliminated the ones which are the weakest, and or the ones which are, if there's a client involved or a publisher involved, the ones which are going to be less exciting to the publisher. Unfortunately, that's as soon as you get, you know, money involved into it, it becomes a little bit you know, some of your ideas can be limited, which is a great thing about, you know, indie environment, is that none of that stuff exists. You can just get on and
Sometimes it's good, but
yeah.
constraints are nice. Like having somebody to step in and go, you know, racing games are great and everything, but they don't work for us. And you can just go, okay, well, like,
Yeah.
we'll just set those aside. We don't have to throw them in the garbage, but now we can at least focus on this.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things as well. Like our pitches never get, you know, put in a bin. They always get put in a drawer, so that they're always available again. But yeah, so before you've even gone into pre-production, you've got an idea of what this thing could be. And now it's actually, the pre-production is going through improving those mechanics, all those ideas, and improving the art style, and going, okay, by the end of pre-production, the first 10%, you should be sort of saying, okay, we know what we're making, and the vertical slice thing, we have a clear idea of what we're making, and I can't stress strongly enough, and a clear understanding of the tech that we're making it on. I did work on one project where 2 years into the game, we were still having difficulty getting assets into the game. And that's a really, really bad place to be. So we had an entire art team building assets, and they were gorgeous, really quality assets. And I think maybe 25% of them actually came because it couldn't actually push the verts around, or push the textures around. So that's the place you really don't want to be. So that first 10% is just proving all those things.
I think there's another. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you guys were polishing in the prototyping phase.
Yeah.
There's a whole other like chunk of game which I've only ever I think made one, but a lot of people do this, and it's the kind of like a there is a total class of game that's way more story driven or idea driven, or like in the indie space, you know, we'll do these like emotion driven games, which usually like the ending is like you were dead the whole time. But it's like so deep. But like the one game that I made that I tried to do that way, it had like the first 10% took like 3 months, and there was no prototype, there was no art, there was nothing. There was just rolling over this idea of like For me, it was like, you're a robot underwater and you're too heavy to swim. And like, how, like, that obviously it's not a game. So like, how do I make it into a pleasant thing to interact with that has a point or takes somebody from point A to point B? And it was a purely mental prototype process, and it was like, it literally took like 3 months of like showering and like going for runs and like crapping, like all of the normal downtime for thinking about game ideas was all poured into this one weird thing that I couldn't push past this weird idea. But I mean, it's only happened one time, but I think people who do adventure games a lot, or if you're doing something like this where you have really a set style, you have a visual style that you're already doing, you have pretty solid tech, maybe you're going to add HD video to it or something, but you have a really set framework, and really what you're struggling with is like the metaphysical or the emotional content of the thing, and that can be a really weird, long process, especially if you have no idea what you're doing.
The prototyping phase is going to be really different if you're using existing tech to make something that you're quite certain about what it's going to be. And that is, I was saying earlier, where you would get the ideal scenario. But if you're moving into the development of something where you're very much reinventing the wheel, and you're trying to create a game engine that's going to do something that nothing your tech has done before is going to do, that is where things can really change, and you could spend heaps of time. I mean, you have a robot underwater and it can't swim, but there's any number of gameplay models that you could approach for that. And
there's no constraint on it, and it boils down to, oh crap, okay, I'm gonna set a constraint. It's gonna be a 5-day project. So now I have this type thing, and that right away was like, okay, it can't be a series of flashbacks, so that like the game has like 12 levels, because I'm not going to be able to make 12 levels. So now it's got to change and be this other thing. But it ended up being a 10-day project anyway. So.
Just to go back to the question, you're asking, do you spend the 10% trying to come up with the core of the game, like the core mechanic? Is that correct?
I guess to incorporate, what sort of level do you have for design first, and then you're doing prototyping? Obviously, the design document, if you do one, I'm not sure about it because I've got it in his head. But is that an iterative process as well with the design document, going through the prototypes, and then when you get to the 10%, you sort of finalise your design and then sort of building on it?
For us, it hasn't been a matter of finalising. I think that's partially a mistake, but it just being iterative, it never really does get blocked off, and we don't do design docs, not at least the way we work. But for us, the 10% has been about working out what that core is, and for example, pretty much we start with, like, the prototyping goal is to come up with that core mechanic. So for example, train conductor as an example is just like the connecting of the trains to the different tracks. Then now we've progressed a little bit, and we sort of think a bit beyond that in our 10% as well. We go, okay, so what's the art style, what's the theme, and how we can address that look and make it look nice and stuff. And then the step beyond that is how we're going to start to vary up gameplay and keep it interesting over a period of time. So like you have a core mechanic and okay, that's fun to do, like when you're interacting with it, that is fun. But how are you going to continue to make that fun over an extended period of time for an entire game? And if we have like a versatile kind of core mechanic, which is what you're trying to create, if you have a versatile one, you can instantly think of all these variations. It just sort of, like, it's easy. You don't have to like work really hard to come up with variations on a good core mechanic, at least in our experience. So when we do know that that core idea is working, then we try and flesh it out as much as possible and experiment and see what ways we can just really mix it up a bit.
And I can't stress enough like how important it is if your game is about gameplay and it's about having a core mechanic. Prototyping is not just about proving that works, but it's prototyping is a process that forces you to go to like the second or third, to recognize and understand and accommodate the implications of the idea you're putting in. So if you're like, okay, the game is going to have grappling hooks now, there's an immediate problem of making grappling hooks work. But then there's all these other weird implications like, oh, well, does this make the level design different? Does this mean that the kind of bad guys that you are going to encounter are going to be different? Or if it doesn't have bad guys, like how it's really hard a lot of the time. Like even now, after designing games for like 5 years, you can be like, oh man, what if the grappling hook can grab onto these things instead. And it sounds really, really cool in your head, and then you start prototyping it out, and it's like, oh wait, but like,